my store because I had a pretty cute Pi-Fi working there. And next thing you know, he marries her from Drum Right. And Doug and Angie both did babysitting for Julie and me while for our son. And he's always kind of been a treasure. I think he's been a treasure at Oklahoma State. He is one of our most popular and outgoing athletes ever. And Doug, I really appreciate you taking the time. If y'all were listening to us earlier, how much effort he put in to be here on this Zoom call. So Doug, take it away, buddy. Thanks, man.
You thanks for having me, Chris. Technically, yes, you're right. But how actually our relationship got started was in 98. Yes, 98, they passed a rule where we could work during the school year. And so the way it worked was if you had a job for an athlete, you had to come in, you had to talk to the coach, you had to go through compliance, you had to fill out some paperwork. So we get done working out one day in the fall. It's pretty early on. And Chris came in, and I had been to the store once or twice, but he introduced himself. Everybody else in the locker room knew he was. And he said, "Hey, fellas, football games are coming up. If you guys want to do security for a day, I'll pay you." I think it was like $75. And we're like, "Well, what do you got to do?" He's like, "Well, you got to fill out this paperwork. You got to sign it. You got to go take it up to coach. And they got to make sure you take it to compliance. But I'll pay you $75, and you just got to make sure, wave and say hi to people, be nice. And if they ask you to move a box in the back, move a box in the back. But basically, you're security."
Yeah.
And totally legal, totally legit, through all the right. So I was apparently the only one who wanted to make some money. So I signed up to do it. So we get there. So I came in like a day before. Someone went into the back office, and you're like, "Well, hell, this is the easiest thing, easy $75 you're ever going to make. Just stand up there and just, smile. And if you want to go out, grab some food, grab some food." So here's what Chris doesn't know. So I lived on, I'll think of it in 1 second. So I had a house. It was called the Palace, and it was the opposite of a palace. It was Alex Weber, me, Mike Johnson, who played his first 2 years before transferring to William and Mary, and Rodney Suter, a walk-on, who coach just basically said "Hey, you're living with them," and we're unpacking our stuff, and some dude from Miami, Oklahoma shows up, but he helped out with the rent. It was 4-bedroom. I think you would list it as a bath and 3/4 or 2 baths. There was a shower in my bathroom, and there was a tub in Alex's bathroom. But and we tried to attach a shower. That didn't work. So basically, dudes had to come into my room to shower. And then Alex had a toilet and a sink near his. And then we had 4 guys. And it was not, but it had a good little backyard. I had a dog, Basset Hound. So it was perfect for what I needed. It was, stone's throw from campus. It was easy, north side of campus. So, but the guys are like, "Hey, DG, we're going to have a party at your house pregame." We didn't have anything that day. We didn't have any workout. We might have workouts in the morning, and it was like an evening game. I think it was the Tulsa. It actually played Tulsa. And no, it wasn't Tulsa. Anyway, it was a night game. So we're gonna, and Desmond came over and made punch. And so I did the smile and wave thing for about a half hour. I moved a couple boxes. I flirted with Angie a little bit. And then I bounced out the back door, and I went to the party and had a couple of drinks and hung out. And then I was like, it's almost game time. I came back in the back door and, said hi to Chris and said hi to everybody, moved a couple of boxes, and then I was done and got my $75 and went about my day. So that's actually how our relationship started. I 20, however many years later, I let the cat out of the bag. That's
all right. Thanks.
And what's, it's like life comes full circle, right? When, we're looking after your little boy, and now all of a sudden, I got my own kind of little guy, right? And it's just, it's kind of an amazing experience. When Kevin was so little, he was so cute. And then you go away to Stillwater, you go went and played and come back, or you go and Connecticut, you come back, and he's like a grown-up. It's and Katie being a grown-up and watching her play on TV is, it's when I can imagine that. I mean, he feels so incredibly old, right? I mean, so old. So Anyway,
Oh, yeah.
other than that, I mean, look, I've been doing this deal now for, I guess I started full time in 2002. And then I went to France in 2003 for a month and a half and kind of scratched that itch a little bit. And then I started, I started full time at ESPN in 2003. So now we're in
Were you
21.
in Russia?
When I got done, here's the progression of it. This is, how long's your meeting?
Till 1, till 11
Okay.
for you.
So when I got done playing at OSU, I went to this Portsmouth Invitational, which is like for second round picks or, free agent guys, overseas guys more. There's occasionally a first round pick. I played pretty well. And back then they went from Portsmouth to Chicago or Phoenix. And I was invited to Phoenix, but didn't go. Chicago, I didn't get invited to. Those are usually like the high first round draft picks. The second round picks are locked in. So I played for the Storm in Enid, which
Right.
which was actually a higher level than just about, I mean, in many ways it's higher level. I played with the Lakers in their summer league. And I mean, we had, 6, 7 dudes that had played. Willie Burton is the 9th pick of the draft. Bubba Wells had played, and Galen Young was a second round pick. Like we had all these guys. And then we had a kind of contingent, my first year of OSU guys, Keontae Roberts, Brett Robish, Adrian Peterson, me, and I think Joe Atkins played that year, and Montnati might even played some that year as well. And that was a blast. And it was a great, I think we played something like 35 games in 40 days, something crazy, maybe 42 or 44 days. And, it's the same game, but it's like a different sport, or the same sport, but a different game in terms of the spacing, the officiating, how it's played. Is very, very different. And there's parts of college basketball which you can use and helps you in the NBA, but there's parts of the NBA which are just so incredibly different. And you have to kind of learn. It's not like when you play in Europe, it's different. Like how they officiate, how you play, the style of play, the pace of play, where the shots come from, all that stuff. It just, you have to assimilate to it. So the USBL was amazing because here you are playing against really high level guys. And you get kind of trial by fire, right? Like you're right out of college and you just got done playing, and now all of a sudden you're playing against grown ass men, and in a kind of different style, playing the same sport. And it was, I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was up and down year, whatever. And I did that instead of doing the workout deal, because the idea was I would look better in a team setting than I would in an individual workout. Individual workouts, 1-on-1, 2-on-2, that doesn't bring out what I do best is 5-on-5. And the space of a pro game really fits my ability to pass the ball. So we did that, and it went really well. We lost in the finals. And then I played in Los Angeles. Back then, the summer league was at Long Beach State. And my dad put together a free agent team with a bunch of guys that I had played with growing up, and then we all played in college. So I didn't play with an NBA sponsored team in summer league. It was a little different then. And then my coach in the USBL, Brian Gates, he got a job in Idaho. Meanwhile, I had signed with the team to train in Italy and then play in Russia, which is weird. And it was actually owned by my agent. It was a weird year in overseas basketball. The Olympics pushed everything back. This is 2000. There were some new rules in terms of how many Americans you could have. And when you're Jewish, you can obtain dual citizenship. You don't have to do anything other than show up in Israel and say you're Jewish and prove that you're Jewish with documentation, and you automatically get dual citizenship. And traditionally, dual citizenship in any foreign country outside the United States, they used to have limitations on how many American players you can have and no limitations on how many non-American players you can have. Well, I lucked out into 2000. They kind of changed that. And they basically said, well, you can have 2 Americans, or you can have 2 Western Europeans and 2 Eastern Europeans. And because I would have been a new citizen, I wouldn't actually be an Israeli to play in Israel, and I would be a new citizen. So I was going to play as it's called a Bozeman B in Russia for a team that trained and lived in Italy. So we get married August 12th. August 13th, we fly to Chicago because my agent, Herbert Doy, is in Chicago. He's like Tony Kukoc's agent. He was a very big European agent. So we go see the Cubs play. That was back when Sammy Sosa was in his heyday or whatever. And we have lunch with my agent. And he says, I got good news for you. I remember I've been married for all of 2 days. I got good news for you. Because we had not done honeymoon because I was supposed to go to training camp like 2 days later. Like I'd worked out all up until like I got married. Then we were going to go like 2 days to Chicago, have lunch, fly overnight to Milan. We're staying in Varese. Training camp's like 2 weeks long, 3 weeks long in Italy. And they sold it to me as like, you don't need to take a honeymoon. Like take your wife to Italy. It's even better. It's right on Lake Como. It's amazing. Like done, sold, right? Like all you gotta do is pay for her ticket. No problem. None, no problem. So we fly to Chicago. We do the Cubs game. We sit down. He's like, hey, I got good news. Training camp is postponed for a couple of weeks. Like, because I do have some bad news. I was like, wait, that's the good news and then there's bad news? Yes, here's the bad news. So the bad news is can't bring your wife to training camp. It's like, but you got 2 weeks to take a honeymoon. I was like, okay, this is before the explosion of the internet. I couldn't just go on my phone and go like, oh, okay, let's go here. Didn't have a flight back to Oklahoma. Had all our lively possessions with us, right? And that was a fun sale. So we came back and stayed in Drumright I stayed in that Drumright the next 2 weeks. And I didn't have any money. And our thing was like, we're not taking any money from anybody. Like so we don't owe anybody. So that sounded like a good idea. Our parents were kind enough to put us up for a couple weeks. And one of her friends in town, a guy named C.D. Osterhout, who owns a liquor store in Drumright, said, hey, you want to make some money? And I said, yeah, is bear shit in the woods? Yes, I would. Excuse my language. Like, yes, I need to make some money. I have no income. I made USBL money. I did a couple of radio things. I did a couple of ads for people. And I needed some money. So he's like, okay, well, what do you do as far as basketball? I said, well, I get up early in the morning, I go to OSU and I work out. And then I go back at night and play or work out again. He's like, perfect. He's like, we're building a wall in a home across the street from the high school. You want to be part of the crew? I was like, I don't know anything about building a wall. It's like, you just do what they tell you to do, right? So, I mean, it was hardcore manual labor. And I am a Southern California kid. I do not, it's a one garage. Like I don't come from a 3-car garage in some luxurious Orange, California. You can look it up online. It's a 1,400 square foot house. So it's not like I'm spoiled, but I am not a manual labor sort of dude. I like to do it. You know, Coach Sutton used to have me cut his lawn or his rent house's lawn for money. And I also worked in town one summer and did demo on house. So I like it, but I just don't know what I'm doing. I don't think either of those guys actually knew what they're doing either. The wall still stands in Drumright. It is not level, but it was during those 5 days when I made, I think 10 an hour, that I decided whatever I do, manual labor will not be part of my future. That was manual labor will not be part of my future. And I made the pact to myself. And though I do some manual labor, it is by choice, not for profession. So anyway, I go to Italy and I train with this team. And then I fly to Israel to get my passport. And they're like, and they asked me where I lived. And I said, well, currently I live in a hotel in Italy. And I just thought honesty is the best policy. My agent at the time didn't tell me to say anything different. Like, no, to have citizenship, you must to live in Israel for 1 year. I was like, whoa. Nobody told me any of that. So I go outside to my agent, and there's an Israeli agent. And I was like, they said I have to live in Israel. They're like, no, you must tell them you live in Tel Aviv. I was like, you didn't tell me that before I walked in. Like, well, why you tell them this? I was like, dude, they asked me questions. They spoke English. I gave them the answer. They asked where I live. I said, hotel. So now this guy's scrambling. Now it's like, okay, maybe you just got to play in Israel. I went to that night. So I'd been like flown all day. I've been working out twice a day with this team. And it was a really talented team in Varese that my agent had put together. And now I'm like, I don't have a job. I don't have any money. And I'm in it. There's no like, he like handed me a cell phone to call home, whatever. And they took me to like a practice for Maccabi Ashdod, which is Ashdod is down on it's on the coast. It's pretty close to the West Bank. It's not Tel Aviv is amazing. Ashdod is not amazing. And I'm in some like torn up gym, and I've been to Israel before. So I'm like, I knew, it wasn't like I was, you go from Gallagher Iba and playing in the States to playing. It's a very different to play in a foreign country. But I just remember like I barely ate anything. I hadn't slept. I don't know if I was any good. I was just in a bad mental place. I was set to make X, play for this other team as an Israeli, and then to play as a new Israeli in Israel for this team. I knew the dollar amount was far lower. I was just in a bad place. And then I flew back to Italy, and I don't think they had told the coach yet. The coach didn't like me to begin with because he was Yugoslavian, and Yugoslavian coaches think their point guards, unless they're NBA players, are supposed to be like 6'5" or 6'6". And so there was 2 point guards. One was Keith Mr. Jennings. Keith Jennings is like 5'9", but he played in the NBA, played East Tennessee State, scored like 2,500 points. Like he's the antithesis of me as a player. Like all he does is score. And he was a grown up. He was an awesome dude. And I had to go against him every day. And I did well. But because I was like the non-NBA American, not 6'7", 5", or 6'5" as a point guard. Like he didn't dig me. So he didn't dig me to begin with. And then I remember like I got picked up by the team van, but it dropped me off like 2 blocks from the hotel. The team was still practicing because I was supposed to get my passport. It was like raining. Like it was like, oh my God, this is the worst. And then I got back stateside. So like it was like 2 days before somebody told him like, hey, he's not gonna be, because you physically can't play with more than 2 Americans. And without a passport, I'm an American. So they're not going to keep me over Keith Mr. Jennings. It's just not going to happen. So I fly back to the States. I was in the Lakers. At some point in time, in between while being in Italy, they'd flown me back to be in this Lakers mini camp. I'd done well, but not well enough to make it to the vet camp. And I'm like, well, this is rough. So I started doing fill-in radio in Oklahoma City because at the time, Jim Traber was the radio voice of the Arizona Diamondbacks, and they were quite good. And this is 2000, guys, 2000. So I would fill in for, Al was off all the time. And then when I was even there doing the yeoman's work a little bit, and in the summer a little bit. And then when I came back, I was filling in. We got an apartment in Edmond, like a brand new apartment. And Angie started working at Shorty Smalls because we didn't know when we couldn't take like a legit job because we were going to travel together. And so I started doing fill-in stuff. And then my USBL coach, Brian Gates, called me and said, hey man, I'm in Idaho with the Stampede. This is back when the CBA still existed. We're bringing a lot of point guards, but you can make this team. It's you, Darren McClinton, he was the other point guard with the Storm. And again, I'm the opposite of him. He's a scorer. I'm a run the team kind of guy. He's like, I think you can make this team. And, you beat out Darren in the USBL. There's no reason you can't beat him out here. And they had drafted a guy named Aubrey Reese, who is a Murray State point guard, like 5'11", jacked, scoring machine. So I was different than those guys, but I was like, all right, well, F it, let's do it. So I fly to Idaho. Rory White's the coach. And there's 13 point guards. And there's no like guaranteed contracts. You're making, I think if you make the league, it was like, I don't think it was 1,000 a week. I think it was like 500 a week. And you're in Boise, Idaho. And we're doing like 2 and 3 a day practices. And we started doing this thing where we'd open up the Idaho Statesman every morning on the shuttle bus that took us from the hotel. We're all staying at like a Ramada. So the Ramada gave us the shuttle bus and it drove us to this junior college where we practiced every morning. We practiced 3 times a day. Now remember, like, again, you're going against grown ass men, and there's a difference in, you think it's like every level. When you come from high school to Notre Dame and then Oklahoma State, like I played a good high school coach. My high school coach became the best junior college coach in California. And in no way was I ill prepared, but in no way was I prepared for the level of strength, athleticism, intensity of college basketball. You just can't replicate it. So step up in practice, you're like, man, at Notre Dame, I got my ass kicked my first couple of weeks. Then you come to Oklahoma State, a little bit better athletes. And that's a higher level of competition and practice. And you're like, no one's ever going to practice this hard. Because you think of the NBA, you think of those guys don't practice hard, right? Then you go to a CBA where there's 13 dudes fighting for 2 spots, and they're grown men, and they need this. This is their only job they have in the world, is to put a basketball into the hoop. And I mean, it's the most intense workouts and practices. I mean, and everybody's nice to each other, but dudes want to kill you when you're playing against them. So it's awesome and hard at the same time. So we used to open the Idaho Statesman and read the transaction thing in the back newspaper. Yeah. And the NBA teams were in camp or in their season, and we'd see an NBA guy get cut. Like, oh, we joke around, like, go around the bus, like, oh, he's going to take your job. He's a small forward. Oh, he's going to take your job. So the camp goes on for 2 weeks. We get to the end of 2 weeks, and there's only 3 point guards, me, Darren Clinton, Aubrey Reese. And then Aubrey rolled his ankle. And so Brian Gates, who had been my assistant, he's assistant now in the NBA for the last 15 years, whatever. You know, he called me one night. He's like, dude, I think you're going to start. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. You know, he's like, yeah, you're playing really well. And I finally kind of, the shooting thing had kind of taken on, you know, it was like an anxiety thing. And it's really hard to get over. And I had dealt with it enough to where I could make shots, I could make free throws. I mean, I wasn't Steph Curry or whatever, but you just had to keep people honest for everything else you do. So literally the last day of camp, we're rolling from the hotel, and I open up the paper, and we're doing the whole transaction thing. And I saw Randy Livingston gets cut from the Chicago Bulls. Now, Randy Livingston, I'm trying to draw a parallel for you guys in terms of the level of hype. Like a Blake Griffin level of hype, maybe even more. He was the #1 player in the country coming out of high school. He went to LSU. He tore his ACL as a counselor at the big camp, the ABCD camp. I was there. He just like planted, thought he hurt his knee, tore his ACL. So he only played, I think, like 2 years in college. He ended up playing for 13 NBA teams, then played overseas. He was a 6'4", 6'5", next Magic Johnson point guard. So I never forget, I'm looking at the paper and I'm like, oh, he's going to take somebody's job. So the way the season worked was we had a workout, then we went home, and then we had team pictures, and then at the arena downtown. And then the next day we were going to scrimmage College of Southern Idaho, where Coach Sutton coached. He started that program. We're going to scrimmage College of Southern Idaho, and then we had a day off, and then we had the first game of the season. So I get back to my room, and Brian Gates calls me, and he's like, hey, Angie's in Oklahoma, right? Yeah, his girlfriend now, his wife, is in Oklahoma too. Like, do you want to share a U-Haul? I was like, yeah, sure. He's like, all right, so I'll hit you later today. I'll call you later today. I'll tell you about some apartments where you guys stay in, and we'll try and figure out sharing a U-Haul. So this is right before we're going to pictures. So we go to pictures, and we're in the arena. And you guys know what the vomitorium in an arena is, the like tunnel where you walk in to the locker rooms for, right? You walk in and out of it. It's called the vomitorium. It's great word. And I'm taking pictures, and I look, and I see this tall silhouette with a bald black head. And I was like, it's almost like you see a ghost. Like, excuse my language. That's Randy Livingston. And I was just, in my mind, I was like, I'm going home, right? I didn't do anything wrong, going home. So we're shooting, we're doing interviews and all this stuff. I have a uniform. I still have my uniform, 44. I have it. Then we go to this scrimmage the next day. Nobody says anything to me. And I thought I was like competing for a starting spot because Aubrey was hurt and me and D. Clinton were going at it. And everybody plays in the scrimmage except for me. And I was like, oh my God, I really am going home. And I get back and there's a phone call and like, hey, come in. And Rory was incredibly gracious. Like, you're awesome. Just Darren played with us last year. We drafted Aubrey, and Randy Livingston's an NBA, point guard. And okay. So I go home and I'm like, maybe I need to get back to manual labor, right? Maybe that's what needs to happen. And when I was a senior in college, my last Big 12 tournament, the first game we played Kansas. Okay. And here's a story I don't think I've ever told anybody. So we played Kansas. And if you remember that year, we beat Kansas by 33 points in Gallagher's Roy Williams' worst loss ever. In fact, it should have been worse, but Coach Sutton called a timeout. He was like, hey, I got to go back up there next year. Take it easy. We ran what's called delay game most of the second half. We just kind of held the ball. We could have beaten them by a million. They were just, Collison was a freshman and Heinrich was a freshman and Gooden was a freshman, and we were grown men and we beat their ass. And so we go back to play them, and we lost to OU the last game in the old Gallagher. Maybe it's because we're up 9 and coach took me out and put Andre Williams in, who tried to catch the ball with his elbows instead of his hands a couple of times. I don't know. We played terrible. We had a lead. We were playing great. And then we just all collectively choked. So we're the 5 seed. We should have won the league, and we're the 5 seed, or we're the 4th. Yeah, we're the 5 seed, I think. So we had to play Kansas the first game. And it's early. It was the first game of the day. So it was like noon start time or 1 o'clock start time. But our shoot around time was at 7 a.m. And I was like, I want to go. Coach was like, you can go if you want. So I went with Brian Lewinstra, who died obviously in the crash, with Snake, who died in the crash, right? And I'm trying to think who else. I think Rodney Suter, was like the 4 of us. And we go down. So we have Kemper for an hour, just me. Oh, and Brian Farr, Brian Farr wasn't there. He was at Texas then. So we had Lewinstra. So it's Lewinstra, Snake, me, and I think maybe Zach Cazell was another walk-on, who was my roommate in this trip. And then Rodney Suter is my roommate at home. So the walk-on's me, and they're feeding me, and I'm getting loose, and then we're messing around. And so 2 things happened during this shoot around. One, and Chris, maybe you know his name. What's the guy's name? I think he's retired now. He's the old team doctor for OU basketball. He used to yell at us and talk trash to us the whole time. God, I forget the guy's name. He comes trotting in because OU has the next shooting time. And I'll never forget that Lewinstra went and ran him out of the gym. It's our gym time. Get out. Yeah. So that happened. And then Tim Allen, who was the director of communications for the Big 12, he comes up afterwards and he hands me his card. And he's like, hey, we'd really like you when you're done playing to call games for the league. And then he introduced me to a guy named Pete Durzis, who ran ESPN Regional, ESPN Plus at the time, which became ESPN Regional. So I had these 2 cards, and I am terrible with my executive functioning skills. So what you learn when having kids are terrible. I'm not organized at all. Thank God for Chris setting this up. But I have 2 cards. I get cut in Idaho, and I get home to Oklahoma City. And those are like the first 2 calls. I called Larry Bastida at the radio station and Traber and try to get some money. And then I called these 2 guys. So they're like, well, schedule's kind of out, but we can sneak in for a couple of games if you want to do it. Great. So my first game was Butler versus TCU at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Now keep in mind, Thad Mott is the coach at Butler then. And this is before Hinkle's redone, before Butler was really all that good. But Scott Robish, who I played with, is on Butler. So it's one thing to have a relationship with coaches, which I already have. I have a relationship with the actual player, Butler. That's the first game I ever called. And then like a week later, I had TCU versus Texas Tech at the Fort Worth Convention Center. And I was, so I called the game, and then Pete Durzis invited me up to his room. He had a big suite up there. We had a drink, and then I got a call from a team in Salina, Kansas in the IBL. Hey, do you want to play? We'll pay you more than anybody in the league, and you can leave whenever you want. It's like a $5,000 buyout of the contract. And I was like, okay, when? They said, we have a doubleheader starting tomorrow night in Des Moines. So I fly from Fort Worth to Des Moines, play 2 games with a team I never practiced with. And then we bus home from Des Moines to Salina. I played 6 games in 7 days in the IBL in Salina, Kansas. And then I flew to Russia, played in Russia, came home, radio, then Lakers Summer League, then 9/11. So did more radio, flew to Israel, played in Israel, came back, played in Phoenix, did radio and played for the Oklahoma City Storm. And then at some point in time, got a call and got a tryout at ESPN, and the rest is history. So it was a lot. It was a lot. So people always say like, well, it's been really got to be really kind of chaotic moving, because I did ESPN for 10 years, 9 up there. I did CBS for 5 years, 2 in California, 3 back in Connecticut, working out of the city. And now this is after year 4 of Fox. Like, why? You've moved a lot. Like, this is nothing. Try being a bad professional basketball player. So fast forward to now, and I get to call games, which I love doing. I do radio, I do TV, I'm do radio for the entire tournament this year for Westwood One. I've had my own TV show, which was fun, but a lot of work. I've done my own national radio show now I've been a solo act now for close to 15 years. I get to coach this year, because there's been so many cancellations. I've gotten to be home on some weekends, and so I get to coach my kid, which is amazing. He should play baseball. He's a stud baseball player, but he's currently taking a little break from baseball. He wants to be better than me. He told me, I want to be better than you at basketball. All right. I'd like to be better than me too at basketball too. So, but he's a good little left-hander. Thank God he looks like his mom's side. And then I have 2 little girls, one who I think could ride at OSU, although right now she's doing jumpers, and she doesn't want to do equitation. I'm not sure we can afford to get an equitation horse. I don't know enough about it. I just know she's awesome, and I'm her biggest fan, and she wants to be a pro. And then I have her twin sister, wants to be like her twin sister, but is not there as a rider, but she's a cute little girl who is an incredible chef. And yeah, that's about it.
Hey, Doug, speaking of radio shows, I've got to go do my radio show. Starts here in about 3 minutes.
I talked everybody out.
But listen to me. Here's my question. Larry Reese is my co-host typically on Thursdays. Is that what's holding me back? Is that why I don't have an answer show?
It's a great question. I love Larry. I mean, his voice, it just overshadows everything.
Well, Tom Dorado's with me on Mondays. I've got Chris Young on Fridays. I think I'm just hanging around I should have been a solo act.
That's it. Actually, my first true radio stint was filling in for Robert Allen in Stillwater after my sophomore year.
So you overcame a lot.
I have.
Hey, good
it's
stuff.
Fun
Thanks,
though, right?
Doug.
I mean, like I remember, it's interesting. I've only not had a radio show for 3 months. It's when I left ESPN to go to CBS, and I missed it. I was muttering to myself. Whereas now, like, I get everything out. I'm actually a pretty quiet person outside of radio.
So Doug, we had one question on chat I think is worth asking. So what's Doug's favorite non-basketball OSU memory when he was a student?
Oh God, so many.
Be careful what you say. I think.
OSU is obviously a very special place, and when you first get there, like I rolled up into town, I drove 25 hours from Southern California. I stopped in Lake Havasu. I had a buddy who had a place. His family had a place there. We like water skied, and I drove 20 hours straight. And I never forget, because on my visit, my plane got delayed a bunch, so I landed at night. The next day was kind of dreary. I was in Stillwater. They played A&M, and then I left the next morning. So I hadn't really seen Oklahoma State or Oklahoma even. So when I rolled into Oklahoma City on I-40, I stopped. I thought what's that cut through on 44? Like I thought there's a big building there. I thought it's called the Tower. I thought that was downtown Oklahoma City. Like I didn't know. I thought, all right, there's a tower there. I actually stopped there, called Mary Lee Draper in the office on the 800 number and asked for directions. Went up I-35, got off. So there's 2 memories that are very early on. There's a million memories, obviously. First one is my first day in Stillwater. I got there early, so excited, shot in the gym. I go upstairs. Nobody's in town. It's like Friday. Everybody's supposed to be there Monday. And so I asked Coach, like, where should I go? What should I do? I already ate at Eskimo Joe's. I already shot in the gym, put my stuff in my dorm room over at Bennett Hall across the street. Like, what should I do? He's like, you should, bunch of people from the athletic department going to the high school game. You should go watch. They got a kid, Holiday. He's going to be the starting quarterback. His dad's the baseball coach, whatever. So I go to the high school football game with all these administrative people. They all go to watch Stillwater play, and Matt plays great. And I'm like, I think I'm watching the next John Elway. And so they're like, hey, come down and meet Matt, whatever. So I go, and he kind of blew me off a little bit. And so fast forward, we're super close friends. His wife is a Pi Phi. But I never let him forget that my first day in Stillwater, he blew me off. He was a high school kid. He didn't really blow me off. He just had a bunch of people around him. The other one is, so when you first, you're like, when do you start to feel like it's your school, right? Because I've been at Notre Dame. And when you're at Notre Dame, it's like the blue pill, like you're all in on Notre Dame, everything Notre Dame. And then when you're out of Notre Dame, you're like completely out. You want to get rid of all your stuff. Then you go to a new school, and it's weird, right? It's my third school or technically fourth school in 4 years. I went to junior college for a year, didn't play. They beat Oklahoma that year in football. Now, it was helped by the fact that John Blake might be the worst football coach I've ever seen. But the important part was, I think it'd been 26 years since OSU had won in Stillwater against OU. And I'm watching them tear down the goalpost, and I'm crying. I'm like, and I remember Joe Atkins like, man, what you crying for? And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm just happy. My school beat their school. And I grew up watching Oklahoma football in California. Like, I loved OU. Like, Jamil Holloway run the option was awesome. Right? Like, I liked it so much better than the West Coast teams. But all of a sudden I'm watching them tear down the goalpost. I understood what it means for my school, the little brother in football, to beat their ass. And I felt like I was a part of it. And that's probably my best non-football moment. What else? We got any more?
Well, there was one more thing on
what's
chat
your
that I will share.
best memory? What's your best memory as a basketball player?
Best memory as a basketball player? God, another one of a million. The KU game in Kansas City that I discussed. So remember, we beat them. We beat them at our place. Remember, they were doing construction, and the street in between the old practice fields for football and whatever, there's a church there, right? There's a little kind of alley street there. We always used to park there because you couldn't park in the coach's lot. And all of our cars got towed that night. We beat Kansas by 33 points on national TV. We run them off the court. We give Roy Williams the worst loss ever. Jeff Oshie quit. He quit. He fouled out on purpose. I was dribbling the ball. He had 4 fouls. There was like 7 minutes to go, and he fouled out on purpose. And he's like, I'm out. Anyway, what should have been we come out, we're like, where's our cars? Like, yeah, they towed them. So that's a downside to a great game. So anyway, then you fast forward like a week later, we play Kansas. And remember, we had given away the OU game, and everybody has, when you lose a game like that and you look back and you're an honest person, everybody has a hand in it. Like, I was playing great. Coach took me out because he thought they were going to start fouling or something. I don't know. And we lost momentum. But in fairness to Coach, like Hollis Price gave it to me a little bit, scored some buckets late, and I had a wide open 3, and I had hit 2 threes, and I wussed out and ran the play for Glendon, who missed the open 3 to tie it. Okay. But so, I mean, we all had, you go back, everybody has a hand in it. So you have this super negative feeling. You lost your last game at Gallagher. We hadn't lost all year. We were better than Oklahoma. We hated those guys, and we lost to them. And now we got to play Kansas again, who we kicked their ass, and they're coming for us. And the previous year, we played them in the championship game in the Big 12, and we scored like 33 points or something. We were just out of gas.
Yeah.
So I think that was my best game at OSU, was that KU game. I had like 8 or maybe 10. I had a couple good drives. I made my free throws when they fouled me. I had 2, mid-quarter, three-quarter assists to Mace. I just played close to as perfect a floor game as I can play. And we won by 19, but it should have been worse. And there's always like a golf cart to take you to the press conference. We got in the golf cart with Coach, and he looked at me, and he's like, you played a hell of a game. Hell of a game. okay, let's go. Right. And it was just that, like I was not the guy he almost ever complimented. And that's like one of the 3 compliments he ever gave me. And so it was Kansas, and it was in Kansas City. And yeah, I mean, that's probably my moment more than anything else. I mean, I can go through like the way, and I don't know if you guys are like this. I mean, as when you're a fan or whatever, you remember games differently than we remember them. Like I remember every game. I mean, so there are a lot of highs, there are a lot of incredible moments, there's a lot of lows. But that one is a poignant one that's memorable to me, because we were coming off, because of what coach said, because I knew internally how I felt I played, and then getting that confirmation from coach.
How much time do you have to prepare for those daily radio shows? What do you do? I mean, I know Kendrick.
Here's what you're supposed to do.
We got to get away from what Kendrick does.
Well, the rule is in national, I've always been taught, is like an hour for every hour you're on the radio, which what is an hour of preparation, right? So the hardest thing I think is when you take time off, or when you're not on when you're off, meaning like I can't, when I'm done of my radio show, like I don't not watch and talk to people about sports, whatever, you know. So I prepare, some driving around, listen to other people's shows I like, talking to people I know in sports, coming up with my own ideas. But the way I do it is some people have one big meeting. You know, Colin Cowherd, when I film for him, he has one big meeting for an hour, hour and a half. What we do is we meet, I'll send a text or email at night, 1 in the morning. Then we talk for about a half hour, talk through topics. And then, you know, in the next 15 minutes or so, we'll have it kind of lined out of what and how we want to talk about it, what sound we have, and go from there. So you kind of an always sort of on preparation, how I do it. And I do it that way so that if I have this that I want to do, or if I have anything else I want to do in my life up until noon, I can still find ways to get in the proper amount of preparation. Whereas if you do it where you like Colin does, he meets at 6 o'clock in the morning and the show starts at 9, he meets at 6 every morning, he's regimented. I don't want to meet at 9 every morning, because sometimes at 9 I want to work out. Sometimes at 9, you know, with the kids home, I want to do something there. Or sometimes at 9 I'm traveling. So that's how I do it. I do it segmented. Part of that is, I mean, I got some ADD working, so I can't really have an hour meeting and keep my concentration.
All right.
Coffee helps.
Okay, well, I think we'll cut you off there. I'm sure.
Is that it? I want to do more.
Well, I know that you have a great talent for radio, so you could fill all the air that we gave you. But we'll go ahead and end the meeting, and you're welcome to stay around after the meeting and keep talking. But we'll let everybody go.
Say one thing real
Yeah, please
quick?
go ahead.
You know, the best part about my job was a couple great parts. Like I love meeting the players and the coaches, but I love like all these different little college towns, right? I mean, they're all the same and they're all different. Like Lawrence is actually pretty cool. I had no idea. I don't think the same. Manhattan's a little different. Like part of that is my mom did love when she lived there back in the 60s, whatever. But there's nothing like Stillwater. Like it is so unique and so special. You know, I lived right on Main, up above what used to be the sushi house. And we actually lived there when we were married, and we came back from Israel. We lived there for 6 months or something. It is a really special and cool place. And obviously the symbiotic relationship between the town and the school. And when I was there, I felt like it was a basketball town, right? It felt like we were the town. And it doesn't go unnoticed, right? That's the big thing is, and I think everybody the older you get, you're like, what's missing from this relationship? What's missing? It's all you want to say is somebody say is thank you. And I appreciate you. And thanks so much. Right. And really mean it. Right. It's what you want from your kids. It's what you want from your boss, it's what you want from your spouse. And so when Chris asked me, like, I'll do whenever you guys want, we can just open forum. I don't need to ramble about some stupid stories in the past, whatever. But my point is to say thank you, because every time, you know, I come back to Stillwater, I feel like I'm home, and it doesn't make any sense. I've lived 12 years in Connecticut. I've lived now, I don't know how many years in California. I lived overseas for a little bit. And I lived really 3.5 years in Stillwater, but it's very much home. And I thought of this sentence a long time ago, and I've told people, like, I was born in Milwaukee. I was raised in Orange, California, but I grew up in Stillwater. And I mean it. And so to any of you guys who watched, like, thank you, because Stillwater is an indelible part of my life and my family. And it doesn't go, it never went unnoticed how many people have made me feel way better about myself than I possibly should every time I come to Stillwater or talk about Stillwater.
Well, thank you for your kind words, Doug. You're always welcome back. We appreciate, I'll echo the sentiments of one of our members, Damona Doya. I appreciate you dragging us down memory lane. It's sure nice to reminisce. I remember, listening to the Cowboy games and playing out on my dirt basketball floor, where grass still doesn't grow to this day.
That's awesome.
So we appreciate it. Stillwater Frontier Rotary supports literacy, and so we'll be donating a library book in your honor to the Stillwater Public Library. Thank you to all our guests who joined us today. Next program will be next week in person. We'll have our own Mayor Will Joyce will be joining us. And if there's no further business, we'll conclude today's meeting with the four-way test. The four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Number 1, is it the truth? Number 2, is it fair to all concerned? Number 3, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you again. We are adjourned.
Hey, Doug, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Man. Hey, I really appreciate it.
No worries. Anytime, Chris.
Hey, Julie said hi, and tell Angie hi.
I will do the same.
All right, brother.
Is there anything I can do, you let me know, all right?
You got it. Thanks.
All right, say
I
hi to
really
your crew as
appreciate
well.
your effort.
Hey, Doug, this is Richard Ayers. I want to just give my thanks too. Appreciate it. It was great to hear you.
Thank you.
Follow you on national television every time I get a chance.
Hey,
Thank you
Travis,
so
can you
much.
stop recording? Travis, can you